Hello guys, welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be doing a review of the TouchFive alcohol marker range, and these are actually the cheapest markers that I've found on the market so far. So I thought it would be good to do a review in case it helps anyone who's looking for some budget art supplies. So I was actually given the heads up about these markers from my friend Liz, who pointed me to a seller on eBay who was selling them for £52.59 with free shipping. At Google's current estimate, this works out at about $70 give or take. So that was a set of 168 pence, and that works out at about 32 pence a pen. And comparatively speaking, at the other end of the price scale, you've got the Copic Chow, which are the others that I use, which are about £2.70 to £3 something per pen, depending on obviously where you get them. And so obviously these are right at the low end of the price range, and like I said, as far as I can tell, they are the cheapest per unit marker that I found so far. I didn't just dive into buying a set of 168 with no prior experience whatsoever. You may remember way back on my channel I have a review of the Touch 3 markers, which are, as far as I can tell, a predecessor of these markers. And I had an 80 set of those, which worked out at about, they were £35 I believe for the 80 set, and then there was customs on top, which was annoying. I got a customs charge. So for these ones I was really happy to be able to order them within the UK. I was actually looking for another set of the Touch 3 because I had the architecture set, I wanted the animation set, and then it worked out at a better deal to buy 168 of these than just buying a smaller set of those. I apologise if there are any parts of this video that are distracting because they're blurry. Unfortunately my camcorder has developed a fault where it keeps losing focus and not refocusing, and I don't notice until it's too late, so I had to take out a few bits of footage. I'm currently looking for a new camcorder, but I don't know what I want yet, so sorry if it is distracting at all. So when you open these, you'll find that they are in two separate packets, so I believe they are arranged much like the Touch 3 in that there is an architecture set and an animation set or similar. So basically you've got one set that is designed to be kind of neutral tones and greys, and then the other you've got more vibrant tones and the kind of colours that you would use for character illustrations. They have one end which is a chisel tip and one end which is a fine tip, and they have a square barrel, which obviously personal preference, some people might prefer using pens with a round barrel. I'm not particularly bothered either way, so that wasn't a huge concern for me, but just as a heads up in case anyone is bothered about that. I would say that they don't feel particularly expensive when you take them out of the packet. I don't know how to explain it because obviously they're made of plastic, so saying that they feel plasticky seems a bit redundant, but they feel kind of lightweight and they kind of feel cheap. So you know from when you open them that you're not getting a high-end product, but I think that's kind of a given with the price. So from when I opened them, I wasn't exactly like blown away by the quality. I found that when I opened them, the lids did not click on as firmly as some of the other markers I own, and this was shown by the fact that some of them actually arrived already dried up, which was really annoying. So I contacted the seller and they were kind enough to give me a partial refund. They could not, unfortunately, provide me with replacements for those dried up pens because TouchFive don't make and sell individual pens, you have to buy sets. So that's something to be aware of, that if one of them dries up then you are kind of stuck because you can't get a single replacement, you'd have to buy a whole set again. I suppose the price offsets this inconvenience because obviously buying a whole set is not that expensive comparatively speaking to other brands, but it's something to be aware of. The lids are the same on both ends, so I know some brands have a different shaped lid, like Pro Markers for example, and so you can tell quickly which end you're using, but with these you have to look at the picture on the side to see whether you're using fine tip or chisel tip, and obviously when you're picking up the pens quickly and just grabbing them quickly while you work, then that can be a bit of an annoyance because I quite frequently found that I'd open the wrong end of the pen. There was also some smudging to the names on the lids, so I do have one where I just could not read the name, and so I have it listed in my swatches as !blue. Speaking of swatches, I would definitely say make sure you swatch. Obviously with all colours you should definitely swatch, but especially with these because the lids often don't match the ink on the inside, so just make sure that you're fully aware of exactly what colour you're picking up. So I filled out all my swatches, and then in the process I emptied the packets completely out and mixed them up, and then I decided to put them back in colour order. So in one packet I had the warmer tones, and in the other I had the cooler and the neutral tones. So then we're going to get on to the illustration itself. So I used Daler Rowney mixed media paper for this illustration, and this is quite a high-end paper. I know a lot of people obviously will prefer to use just standard marker paper, but I don't actually really like using it all that much. I used to use it all the time with markers because I thought it was the only thing you could use with them, but then I saw that Sophia Lou was using mixed media paper and I decided to give that a try, and I haven't really looked back since, and so I decided to just stick with my usual paper with this illustration for a fair comparison. So the first thing that I noticed when I started to colour with these, like I said, there were a couple that unfortunately arrived dried up already, and there were also some that felt like they were on their way out, and I noticed straight away there was inconsistency in the ink flow of the pens. So right at the other end of the scale there were some that actually felt like the ink flow was much heavier than the others, but there were some pens that kind of the ink flowed so quickly that there were some areas that I struggled to fill in, because obviously with the size of the nib there are some areas you can't get to, but there were some that I felt like I should have been able to fill in, but I went over the lines because the ink was kind of bleeding so quickly into the paper. So with the hair, I decided to abandon the idea of doing soft shading. I did a flat layer and then I decided to wait for that to dry and then to go over it with shading and do a kind of, not a cell shading look, but kind of like a hard edge shading, if you know what I mean. So I decided to maintain a soft shading look on most of the illustration and then go for a harder edge on the hair to emphasise the strands and to minimise the risk of the ink going over the lines. I was pleasantly surprised by how well these pens blended, because I do struggle to blend with a fine tip rather than a brush tip, and that's the reason I tend to blend Copics with a cheaper brand. So the reason I bought the cheaper brands in the first place was because I didn't want to waste the Copic ink by using it on large areas. I know that seems a bit redundant, obviously, buying a pen and then not using it as much as I could, but with Copics I tend to save them for the shading areas, so I fill in large flat areas of the illustration with a cheaper marker and then use the Copics to accentuate it. And so that's how I've been working, and that's what's worked well for me so far. And so with these, I was a little bit worried that I wouldn't be able to successfully shade without a brush tip, but actually I was pleasantly surprised, because I did find that because the ink stayed wet for quite a long time, it did allow me the freedom to keep on blending and keep on building up layers. And I found that when I lent my hand in the ink by accident a couple of times, the ink did still feel wet for longer than I expected it to. Now this does have pros and cons, because obviously if you want to work on it fast, you've got to be careful not to lean your hand in your ink or to go back over it too quickly if you wanted to create a more defined edge in your shading. But in terms of trying to blend with a fine nib, obviously some people might not struggle with that, they might prefer that, but for me, I was a bit worried it wouldn't work, but actually I was quite happy with how well they blended. A disadvantage with these, I found that if you layer a lighter colour over top of a darker one, it can tend to bleach the colour back out of it. It did kind of feel like if I tried to build up colours, because what I usually do is use the lightest colour and then build up the shading and get darker and darker, and then over the top I usually go back over with the lightest colour to blend it over again. That's what I tend to do with Copics and brush markers and so on. But with these I found that when I went back over the top with the lighter marker, it actually took colour back out. And you can see that very clearly when I was colouring the trousers. So I actually went back over the trousers with a lighter shade of brown to kind of blend the shades together, and it took the colour back out on the clothes folds. I did decide to leave it like that in the end because I kind of liked how it looked, but that is something to be aware of, that the colour can actually be pulled back out again with the lighter tones. In some areas of the illustration this did actually end up with a mottled effect, so I didn't want it so much on his skin, which unfortunately happened. You can see on some of the shots where I'm colouring his skin, the colour does suddenly become, after a few layers, very mottled and textured, and that's not necessarily what I wanted. Okay, he's a barbarian, he doesn't have a great skin, it's not exactly a priority for him to have a fantastic skincare routine, but he's not supposed to look quite so mottled. And so that was a little bit annoying, but then after that I figured out I could use that to my advantage, and then when I got to colouring in the bushes at the front of the image, I decided to just keep building and building layers. I think I used about 6 or 8 layers of green, and I achieved that mottled effect on purpose to give the indication of leaves. I can't give a comment on the longevity of these markers because obviously I've used them for one illustration and a few practice pieces for my Hovember, which I am taking part in this year. Well, I'm still going. I know it's December and I'm still going because I'm determined to finish, and I never finish art challenges within the timescale. So yeah, that's still happening. But yeah, I've also been practicing with them for the Hovember and stuff, and obviously so I haven't used them a huge amount yet. In terms of the colours that you get in the set, I thought there was a really great variety. In the greys, there was actually a huge variety of greys. There was about 7 of each of the warm grey, cool grey. There was also green greys and blue greys as well. And so that was really handy for when you're creating obviously different types of shading on your characters. And also there was a nice variety of more vibrant tones and pastel tones, though like I said, there were a couple of tones that were labelled as pastel and kind of came out like highlighter tones, so probably the more vibrant colours I would say are more effective than the pastel in this set. There were also a couple of fluorescent ones, which was interesting because they literally were fluorescent. They were so bright I'm not actually sure what I'm going to use them on because they didn't exactly fit in with my very brown and green toned wood elf. But at some point I will try to find a use for those and try them out. So overall, what I would say about these markers is that for a beginner to using alcohol markers, I would say they'd be a good introduction to the medium. I wouldn't recommend jumping in to buy a big set right from the off if you haven't had experience using markers before, just in case you don't like them. The good thing about these, obviously the major pro, is that they are so cheap. So you can get a set of 80 for £25 or thereabouts. It's obviously a very, very accessible medium thanks to that price, and the 80 set should get you a really nice variety of colours as well. The main con with these, I found that obviously an indicator of the fact that they are a budget product is the inconsistency in the ink quality. So because the ink flow was so heavy, it was kind of an advantage and a disadvantage because you can blend more easily when the ink stays wet for longer, but also I think the pens are going to run out fairly quickly. I can't say for sure. I wouldn't be able to tell you that in detail, but I don't think they are going to last as long as my other markers. So as an introduction to the medium for a new artist, a young artist who doesn't necessarily have the budget to splash out on expensive markers, I'd say give them a go, get used to the medium and then upgrade when you're ready. For a more experienced artist who's looking for something in the long term, I would probably say no. I like the Touch 3. I don't think these quite match up to the Touch 3, and honestly I couldn't tell you what is the difference between them because there is nothing really telling you in the product description. They just have different names and the different shaped barrels, and apart from that I don't know what the real difference is. There's not a huge amount of information out there. So I would be inclined to lean more towards the Touch 3 than the 5. I have also heard feedback from a lot of other people that these tend to run out quite quickly, and I haven't heard the same from the Touch 3. But yeah, so for a professional or intermediate artist who's looking for something to use in the long term, I would probably not say to go for these, but by all means, if you're just starting out, they're a very, very cheap option, and they were a lot of fun to use. I will still continue to use them because they're useful for filling in large areas, and like I've done here, I can create a full illustration with them, and they will be able to be used with all my other alcohol markers, so I'm going to stick with my method of combining Copics and cheaper brands. And a quick note on the character for anyone who's new, because I have gained quite a few subscribers since my last video, so that's probably an indicator of how long it's been since I posted one, so I'm really sorry. I've had a lot of commissions after MCM and obviously I had to prioritise those, so I've been working my way through them. I still have some more commissions to go, so thank you so much for everyone who's buying them and buying things from my shop. I really appreciate it, but unfortunately obviously my video schedule has kind of taken a beating, so I can't guarantee when I'll have more videos up again, but I will try my best. And obviously I work in retail and it's Christmas, so everything is insane. So yes, for anyone who's new, this character is my D&D barbarian Taran. He's a wood elf. He's a very bad-tempered little brat, and I love him dearly. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed the video and that it was useful to you. Please do let me know what you would like to see in future, and thank you for stopping by and taking a look. I hope to see you next time. Bye!